lunch and learn today on Earth Day. Woo, it's very exciting. We are talking about being able to create meaningful student engagement. This is the S in RSI. It's that substantive nature. We're also looking at it through a special lens today, a lens of building that community and that trust. And we're talking about how do we take that community building aspects and also ensure that there's substance involved, meaning that academic chatter as well. So I am so excited. I'm going to tell you, here's my teaser. In 2 slides, you get to find out who our special guest is. Okay, here we go. But just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, we're going to talk about RSI today and substance for it. And now I'm going to introduce you to, well, I think many people know me. I'm Laura Thompson. I'm instructional designer primarily at Stanton, but this is Michelle Keenan, yay! And she's English department chair at Owens.
Yes.
And she is going to be able to work with us today. I'm really excited to talk about this whole development of trust, which is what her doctorate research was based upon. And so I'm so excited for her to share her expertise in that area with us today as well. And so, Michelle, I'd like to hand it over to you to go ahead and operate the warm-up.
Absolutely. So we would like to know, from a personal level, from your point of view, what is the most meaningful feedback or interaction that you engaged in as a student? So what is a feedback or interaction that you had as a student that meant something to you or that had a profound effect on you?
So I'll go first, I guess. So when I was in college, I had a French teacher, and I'll just say that she observed based on a couple of classes where I guess like I wasn't myself, but things were not going well. And she set up like a special meeting with me and stuff like that. And it was really nice, so.
I love that, the ability for your instructor to understand that things were going differently for you means that she was clearly aware of who you were typically and able to kind of identify that things were going in a different direction. Amazing. Amber said personalized feedback along with individual meetings with my instructor actually showed that she cared and had really looked at my work carefully. Really important. Sharing thoughts in each other's projects to help us improve, and then opportunities for one-to-one meetings. I think that the theme here that you might be able to see is that all of these are really individualized. This idea that the feedback and engagement that was the most meaningful to us was the ones that were personalized. They were individual to us. The ability to provide those opportunities to share, to have conversations, whether it was feedback on work or, you know, just taking an interest in life and how things were going. Awesome.
Just to give us a reminder of what we've done the past couple weeks, because you do not have to attend every single one of these lunch and learns. They are standalones, but we have a recurring theme in these ones that's about RSI. RSI is regular substantive interactions. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we are responsive to our students and that we do that on a regular basis. So these are your scheduled things. For instance, you can schedule weekly announcements in your course. You can schedule with intelligent agents. You can have all of these things programmed into what you're doing. But we also want to make sure that we're having that substantive interaction with our students as well. We're adding that academic focused language. We're trying to help them improve and perform in their coursework. And that's what we're trying to do here. And another important point to make is that these are instructor initiated interactions. So it's not just waiting for the students to reach out and comment and to ask a question. It's posing those questions for them. Oh, some students have questions about blah and blah. If you have those questions, come to student hours this week so that we can talk about them. Where you provide a brief paragraph that gives them tips for how they can be more successful with that blah that has created issues for students in the past.
One of the things that is really important when we're talking about RSI is the substantive part, right? Like this idea that the interactions need to be meaningful. They need to focus on creating student success and pulling our students into our classrooms and engagement. So, when we're talking about substantive interactions, we want to make sure that we're going beyond the surface level. So when we talk about things like announcements, right? That is something that goes out to all of our students. It's something that we can like create and it's regular and we're going, forward with them. But when we're talking about something like an announcement, if we want it to be substantive, we want it to make sure that it's addressing student needs. And in order to do that, we have to be aware of student needs. So when we think about building trust, just as a caveat, for those of you who may not have heard me talk about this before, uh, trust in instructors is one of the most important and successful ways to build student success in your class. So it's been indicated by research to actually be more of a factor in student success than even engaging learning activities or student grit. Because students need to be approaching the class and content in a trust way, so they're not facing it in a fear way, because fear really blocks our ability to learn and understand. So we want our students to know that we care about them, that we have concern for them, and not just to trust that we care about them as people, but that we are able to provide the information that they need to be successful in the course. So it's really twofold, this idea that we want them to be successful and we have the tools to help them be successful. So we want to make sure that when we are talking about our interactions, we don't want them to be shallow. We want them to be really deep and meaningful. And all of the examples that you guys gave were really meaningful examples, whether they were based on the academic portion of trust building or on the personal aspect of trust building. So something that we all want to do is to learn our students' names, right? That should be one of the first things we do in a face-to-face or hybrid class, is to be able to identify our students, learn their names, and say them correctly. That is, a number one thing. And it's definitely a method of trust building, but we want to go further than that. We want to understand the students as people, and that's where we really get into this humanizing aspect. We're not just humanizing them, though, we are also humanizing ourselves. And when we talk about RSI, we think about this in a lot of a technology or virtual world. So we need to find methods that we can humanize our students and ourselves in sort of this virtual online environment, right? And, we want to do that in a way that still provides comfort for our students. So, one of the things that I do if I'm teaching a hybrid or an Zoom course would be, when I discuss cameras on, right? When I make suggestions that my students turn on their cameras. They can see me, I can see them, we're interacting with each other with our facial expressions. But that might not be plausible for all students. We understand that that's not the lived experience for all of our students, that they are in a position where they can turn their cameras on and feel comfortable in front of a classroom of people with their cameras on. So, one of the things I always make sure to do in a Zoom course is to offer opportunities at the end or in the middle of course for individual breakout room time with just me. And I have found almost consistently that even if a student has their camera off during the class-wide lecture or class-wide discussions, when they are in the breakout room, they turn their camera on. When it's just me and them, they flip that camera on. It becomes a more humanizing activity. And that's just one way that we can do that in a virtual setting. There are multiple things that we want to do. But the really important part is that we show them that we are real people and that we understand them as real people. They have priorities outside of our classrooms. They have families and lives and kids and they're caretakers. They have jobs. They have all of these things. And we know just from what the research says that most students do not stop classes or college because of the coursework. It is because of the outside factors that they have to prioritize in order to take care of their lives. So if we have humanized them, like Jack's teacher, then we can say, hey, I noticed you're not attending class or you're not yourself. You've stopped, submitting assignments. What's going on? And then we can lead them to resources. But we have to know them originally to be able to do that. And the other thing is that we have to go in with the mindset that they are capable of being successful. Asset-based mindset is the crux of culturally responsive pedagogy. If you do not have an asset-based mindset towards your students, you cannot be culturally responsive to them. You cannot build trust with them because they will know that you don't think that they can succeed. And for them to believe that they can succeed, you have to believe that first. You have to tell them. You have to tell them repeatedly, like, I know you can do this. I know that there are obstacles. Here are the things that might get in the way. Let's talk about ways to overcome them. So, again, in order to do that, we need to lay that foundation of trust. They need to believe us. We can stand up there and say, I know you can do this all day, every day. But if we don't mean it, they don't believe it. So, we really have to lay that foundation of trust first.
And I guess you were just inspiring me to think about this too. Some levels of approximated success. That's something that I had worked with towards my students. And what that means is that you're looking for those smaller benchmarks that you can point out. If you're saying, I know you can do this, and it's writing a novel and they haven't written a paragraph yet, that's really hard to think, oh, yeah, I can write a novel, sure. But being able to say, oh, look, you already have this many pages done, or these many words already constructed, or you've been able to finish this many problems, or you've gotten to this level of the project, this step of the project, being able to help them recognize that success, which I noticed in some of our course designs, we're starting to have steps to the final project where we have little benchmarks that are measured or evaluated. And those things are quite helpful in the formative sense to help students recognize, okay, now I've got that piece done. I need to tweak it a little bit, but I can move on to the next part. And I really appreciate that you brought that up.
Again, either in the chat or you can, call out what are some of the things that you have done to foster those substantive interactions, those humanizing, deep asset-based interactions with your students.
Um, I guess I'm inspired to be sure I'm in the right mindset because I get frustrated with some students and I perceive them as being lazy. Occasionally it has come up, and I have to go in with a mindset, maybe I don't know everything and I need to show them their successes. I mean, I try to be positive, but I know there are, because I've been doing this for decades, that there are years when I have a student, I'm just like, this is ridiculous. But if I go in with that back in the back of my mind, am I presenting a negative mindset that maybe they can't build on and come overcome? So I don't know. I'm from the old school, be real. Like, you're not doing your work, what's up? And maybe I need to be a little more gentle, and so they don't feel, I don't know. I can't say that I'm terrible in any way, but I'm sure I could do better.
Well, and the really important thing I think about like learning to build trust is not this idea that we have to change our personality, right? Like your allied health, right?
Yeah, dental hygiene.
So, I mean, this idea that we're training our students to go into these really high intense environments. They have these expectations that are going to be had of them. um you know that's important. to maintain. We need to maintain that rigor. We need to maintain those expectations. And, that is also a foundational component of culturally responsive pedagogy, is that we do not lower our standards for students. We do not lower our expectations. We just remind them that they can meet them. And it does require their push, right? Like it's not take the onus away from the student and put it on the teacher, because we know that's never going to work. That's never going to make a successful student. That won't make a successful employee. It's more the idea of, I know you can do this. um, let's talk about why maybe we're not doing this, or what are your obstacles, and being able to have those harder conversations is really important, because there is a difference between saying to a student, you don't seem to be invested right now, what's going on. And the other thing, the other side, where students have said, well, somebody said to me this week, college isn't for everyone, right? That's not what we want to say to our students. We might be frustrated that they're not prioritizing what we feel they need to prioritize. And that is a very normal, typical reaction, mainly because this is our lives. This is what we do. We understand the importance. And so we want the student to also know, this is your path. This is how you meet the goals you said you wanted to meet. um, but it's coming at it in a way that provides power to the student. Like, what's happening, I'm here for you. There are resources, and building a relationship where the student feels confident that you mean those things, that you're saying them, and that you will help them find the resources, and that you will be a resource for them, without burning ourselves out, right? Nobody wants to constantly be in the position where they are the emotional crutch for someone else. That's not, it is saying to the student, you have this ability, and I'm going to help you get there. And I'm going to give you all the resources that you need, and then you can take it from there, because you can do this.
Yeah, Michelle, I was gonna sort of piggyback on what you're saying there, like just that after doing this for a long time, I just try to never take any that personally, because it's not about me, it's about the student. And then you also come to the student with your own baggage, which they don't need. And the other thing is also, try to understand what's happening or what has happened so far, but just plan for the future. We can still do this. Here's the steps we can take moving forward. Like, let's start new right here. I think that's a
Fabulous. Thank you for that point also, because it's really important. As you said, we all bring baggage to the situation also, and being able to recognize, though, that the majority of the things that are happening with the students, it's rarely ever personal, rarely ever. Maybe there's some personality difficulties, but that rarely happens. There's something else that's going on. So I really appreciate that. I also appreciated Linda's vulnerability that she showed us when you were able to say, well, there's probably a place I can do better. And you provided an excellent segue to the next area. And you get a gold star today, because we're talking about selective vulnerability. Michelle, would you like to describe that a little bit more?
That was exactly perfect. Exactly what Linda just did, and what Liza was just talking about, is that selective vulnerability. That ability for us to say to our students, hey, I get your struggle because I've been there. And not in a way of like, I know, because, we don't want to minimize their obstacles with our vulnerability, but what we want to do is choose very specific times in our education, in our journeys, where we have experienced a similar situation, and introduce that prior to when we know our students might feel that way. So for instance, one of my selective vulnerability that I have is, my discussion with my students about writing. I'm a writing teacher. I teach high level research, and they're going to get back their work from me, and it's going to have comments on it, right? And students are generally trained to see any kind of comment as a negative, right? So if you get your paper back and it has a lot of comments, then you're going to be discouraged. So I share that, I submitted my 8-page paper to my like doctoral instructor, and I got it back and it had 130 comments on it, right? So like, and I'm a writing teacher. This is what I do for a living. And I had to like take a moment and take a deep breath and be like, okay, this is for my benefit. I'm gonna be okay. This is exactly what they're there for. Why and it's funny because then those in my cohort also shared with me that they had similar experiences, right? We would text each other and be like, I don't think I did this well. But I share that with my students so that they go into my feedback understanding, hey, this is not a discouragement. This is not something that says you're a bad writer or you're not going to be able to make it. This is my way of encouraging you to, take my feedback and become a better writer. So selective vulnerability is just that. It can be very academic. Like my example, it's just saying, hey, I'm a person. I've had struggles. I have not been, 100% in all of my classes. I have fallen behind and I have, gotten poor scores, and I have walked into a class and had no idea what I was doing. And that's okay. And so I get it. And that's just building relationships. It's allowing your students to know, hey, I've been there too. I was okay. You're going to be okay.
And the interesting part about that also is being able to have that selective vulnerability so that you have those stories. But it's not just saying, oh, yeah, I also had problems with that assignment. It's saying, here are the strategies that I used to get through it, because you're building that trust with those students anyway. They're recognizing you as an expert until you destroy that, right? And give them the feeling that you're not. But they are looking to you as the model, as the example. And so you can tell them, yes, I struggled in this, and this is how I overcame it. And I still had 130 comments. And yes, I had to struggle with getting those comments and being okay in a place of mind where I would actually read them and use them, because we know that sometimes it's difficult. Students don't always read our comments. And for some of them, it's because the feedback that is provided in the past, at least, has always been pretty negative and pretty final. It's here it is. You did this poorly. It doesn't give suggestions of how they could improve their performance in the future. And that might be our intent, but it's not transparent for the students. Jake, you raised your hand. What would you like to add?
So it's funny you mentioned the feedback, because as a student, I used to look at my feedback all the time. But so many times the feedback would be, I was looking for, you could have done this better. And sometimes you get that. But a lot of the times, and positive feedback is very good because it's, daunting to get nothing but negative feedback. But I think it needs to go to the next level, because the positive feedback would always be, oh, great job. Oh, great job. Over and over and over again. So when I see that feedback, I'm like, okay, they're just going to tell me, oh, great job. And I don't even look at it anymore, which I look at the feedback for the constructive criticism. It's also, put in a positive light. But a lot of the times, even the positive feedback should be substantive or meaningful. So it's kind of like listening to understand, not to respond. Same thing with the feedback. Give feedback to, really show that you looked at the assignment and what did you like about it? What was so good about it? And I know they have lots of students they got to do, so it takes time. I get that.
I like that you brought that up, Jake, because Michelle and I were having this conversation. We were talking about how we have to make sure that and it goes beyond the just good job. We want to give something more specific, something that can be built upon. And we talked about saying, do this again. This was particularly effective. Describe what the technique was. Do this again. This is what you need to do to convey good information to your reader or to your audience, and helping them recognize the things that they do well beyond, like you said, just good job, but being more specific about what it is. And we talk about using different modalities for that feedback, meaning that we often might write things on the side of the project, or now that we have Brightspace, you can annotate things. You can put little Post-it notes on it. I like to use the Post-it notes for my students. Sometimes I'll type right on their paper, or I'll draw things on it, or I'll highlight things. I like to do color coordinated too, where I highlight it in green and I give a green Post-it note, or then I highlight it in pink and I give a pink Post-it note, so they know what goes together. But I have heard Michelle has a story that she'll tell you, I believe, about color coding comments too. But being able to go beyond that, so you have that for the textual, but sometimes again, students, depending upon their experience with constructive feedback, or we as instructors were not in control of that feedback, so we do not know what it was like. So they could have had very negative experiences in the past. So one of the things I'd like to encourage you is to be able to add audio or video feedback as well. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do that on every assignment, because it is time consuming. But for instance, when they turn in the draft, and then they're going to be able to do the final, maybe it would be valuable on those pieces to provide a little bit of audio or video. The reason why is it adds some social cues for the students. So now it goes beyond them just reading that text and trying to interpret it correctly, to now they can hear the tone of voice that you have and recognize you're not saying your paper is so bad. You're saying, wow, this is an area of improvement, and great job, Jake, in this area. I really like how you describe this, something like that. And then if you add video, then they can see your voice. You might even be able to do a screen share where you show their paper, and you can even point to where it was on the paper as you're describing their technique. So those are a couple of ways that you can add to that meaningful feedback, because it provides those social cues, that side of that building trust as well, while you're giving very substantive feedback, something more specific than good job or bad job, where you really give them something that's actionable that they can either keep doing in the future, or that they can change for improved future performance. And Michelle and I also talked about how our rubrics in Brightspace provide opportunities to give feedback inside the rubrics. Would you like to describe that a little bit more, Michelle?
Yeah, so it's really funny that you mentioned the color coding Post-its, because the person I learned that from is actually here. And I was hoping Christina could pop in just while she's and let it and explain, because she was just telling me about this last week, and I was like, I love that. And I shared it. But I was hoping Christina could share it too, how she uses those color coded Post-it notes to make sure that the feedback isn't overwhelmingly critical.
So I'll tell you that I ripped this like any good teacher. I ripped this right off from Stephanie Jeffrey, who's in the Stanton campus. She's an English teacher and she's awesome. Her toolbox is great. She uses color coordination with the Post-it notes. She does green for the positive comments, red for like content, and then she does another color for grammar and like another one for APA. So she has 4 colors. I'm not that structured. I can't do that. But what I have been doing that's been kind of awesome for my students this semester has been just green and red. So I write for each paragraph, this is what you did well, and a red for where you can improve. And I always make sure it's this is where you did well, and this is where you can improve. So it's not what you did wrong. And then because it's easy to circle things and be like, capitalize this and put a period here. But I've really actually, and Michelle was actually just observing me the other day, when I told my students they got their papers back in record time because they followed the feedback and they were able to kind of like think about it and actually make adjustments to the next paper instead of just telling them what to do. So it's actually been really, really successful, and I'm totally adopting that from now on. So green is for good and red is for stop, do something different.
What I'm most inspired by what you just said also, Christina, is how you told your students you used the feedback that I gave you and you made your papers better so that I could turn them around to you faster, so they can recognize the fruits of their labor. That's so important. That's so important. That's fabulous.
That's funny because I was really excited in class when I was like, yes. So,
We found out we're a lot alike. So
well,
we
yeah.
recognize the same thing. We're like, yeah, cheerleaders, woo!
we're gonna be your hype people. So, part of that is inline grading, and if you do not currently use inline grading in D2L and you're grading assignments, writing, I highly, highly recommend taking a look at that, because you can put feedback directly on their work, and you can put a post-it note that says like I put a couple today that was like, this is a great tie-in, or this is a great topic sentence. So things that just help them to understand directly where it is. But the other thing is using feedback in rubrics. And a lot of time with our rubrics, we think just like click, 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 and we pick our numbers and then we hit submit. And then it's like the student just gets a number, right? And it can be a really good number, or it could be not a not so great number, but if they don't have any context, it means nothing. So one of the things I tell them a lot is like, particularly on their drafting and outlines, is you may get a 100 on this draft. That does not mean that you do not have things that need to be adapted. That just means that as a draft you hit the requirements. So putting feedback directly in the rubric is really nice. If your rubrics are broken down, we use a very holistic grading system in English where, we're looking at focus and APA and grammar. So, but if I click a C level for grammar and I don't indicate to my student why they got a C, what help does it do? It doesn't. It's just, oh, I didn't do something right. So what I'll do is I'll put my comments in the inline grading, and then under that grammar part of the rubric, I'll write something like, please review sentence structure, or you have a lot of comma errors. But going forward with that, I include links from our course materials to where they will find how to fix that. So like if I put on there, you have a lot of sentence errors, I'm going to go into our common modules for grammar. I'm going to pull up that fixing fragment and run on lesson, and I'm going to link it in there. Or I'm going to go into Grammar Bites, which, if you don't know, Grammar Bites is a site designed for higher level grammar instruction and practice, and it's fun. I mean, we do it in class with students, and it's can't be fun. It's like silly fun, but the students get real practice in editing and learning. Um, and I might link that in there. Hey, do 10 of these sentences, and so the students are not just getting comments, and they're not just getting a score, but they're getting a path forward. They're getting, here is kind of where you maybe need it to work. Here's the specific thing that I noticed, and here's a resource. Because if we just expect our students to understand where their resources are in our courses or in the world, they're just not going to make that leap, right? Like, and I have seen another thing that I just pulled from one of my instructors was in the Google Note, right, Christina? OneNote. And it's literally, it looks like a tabbed notebook. And for every class, she has a tab. And then under that tab is the assignments. And she has comments and resources already written out for those assignments. So she can go into that notebook, she can open that assignment, she can copy and paste the link to the resource, and she doesn't have to spend hours and hours and hours of her life putting and typing in comments because she already knows the general idea of what's going to need to be worked on. So anytime she adds a new comment to an assignment, she puts it in that notebook and it's there for future use. So a very easy way to provide feedback without overwhelming, because burnout is real and being emotionally available to your students is real, and providing substantive interactions is real. And when we add all those together, if we're doing it in draining ways, we are not going to continue. Right? The same thing with our students. We know that if we push and push and push in ways that are not feasible for them to maintain, they're just going to burn out and not continue. The same thing with us. We're going to be like, well, what can be cut? And the first thing we're going to cut are those things that we deem unnecessary, which would be comments and rubrics and, emails that say, I notice you aren't, attending class lately. And we don't want to do that, because the truth is that's actually foundational. That's the necessary part, right? So we have to find ways to do it that works for both the students and for us.
So we did want to ask you your thoughts. What is one way that you have used feedback to spark engagement with your students?
Of a student. I'm not an instructor, by the way. I'm just in the education program, but I love your trainings. That's why
We're
I come.
glad you're here, Jake. We're glad you're here.
So I know something that my current teacher had done that I really liked was he actually scheduled a 10 to 15 minute Zoom appointment with everybody to go over our rough draft of a lesson plan. So it was like individualized feedback based on what you just turned in. And it was, I don't know, just seemed more personable. And you could, like, as you're getting the feedback, you can ask questions and get any clarity that you may need for that feedback. It was really nice.
That's wonderful. Michelle wrote conferencing for the win. Yay. I had seen inspiration at one point in time that talked about students interacting with feedback that you provide and having them as another assignment that they read your feedback and talk about how they're going to use that in a future product or in a future draft into the final draft. They actually need to read and respond to how you've done it. Now, the example I saw was using video. So the students were making video where they're responding to the comments. You could do it a variety of ways, but that's another way, and definitely not, it doesn't have to be on every assignment, but maybe on those really important ones, the ones that they're going to build on each other, then that's an excellent opportunity for students to be able to interact with your feedback and then provide their path forward, what they think that should be. And it gives you the opportunity also to then correct any misconceptions that they might have misread or misunderstood what you had said. So that's just a little thought, a little idea. Thank you, Jay, for sharing yours with us. And if we move into this, we want to think about modalities. Michelle mentioned this earlier because we were talking about RSI and where these regular and substantive interactions came from was in response to moving courses that are online beyond correspondence courses, where we all are just kind of checking boxes and we're moving on. What we're trying to do also is think about how does this look in person as well? Because I hate to say it, but you've probably been in a class sometime in your past where even though it was face-to-face, that instructor wasn't really there, right? You've probably had that. And you might have attended face-to-face and you weren't really there either. So, I mean, we have these things happen. So it's not only an online thing to think about in an online asynchronous course, although that's where the kind of foundation for the conversation came from. It's also thinking about how do I make sure that I'm offering these regular and substantive interactions with my students in person, and maybe in the way the LMS supports our in-person meetings as well. The LMS is Brightspace D2L. And we know that good teaching is good teaching. We often hear that good teaching is teaching, but sometimes it looks a little different depending upon the method of interacting or the modality of the course. So for instance, we're thinking about in-person discussions, right? We can have in-person discussions in our classroom, and we've got a few people who speak up. If we're really artful, we get a few more to speak up, but we do have a few students who are really reticent in the back, maybe, or on the edges, and they have reasons for that. Sometimes they're second language learner, so they're still processing the language that's going at this breakneck interaction, and they're still processing it to figure out how they would like to say what they're thinking. Or there might just be people who are very thoughtful in the way that they process, and so they don't really get to participate in the discussion. And you as the instructor don't get the opportunity to really assess their understanding in this form of a discussion. So sometimes you want to also have those online discussion board opportunities, even if you meet face to face, to provide your students with that opportunity for everyone to have a voice in that conversation. Because that's one of the things within class is you might not be able to hear all of the voices. And you can also have them provide those citations then. Michelle and I were talking about it. Sometimes it's hard. I can be like, oh, I know Keenan said that, but I know research said that, but you know, I don't remember the year, I don't remember the whatever. So then you can also have students really support themselves with that research, however you choose to have them cite it. And again, those online discussion boards don't always have to be graded. But if you also participate in them, they are more likely to be engaged with. And again, that doesn't mean you have to respond to every single person. That doesn't mean that you have to respond every single, I don't know, every half an hour or something like that. So you're catching everyone. But it's being active in those discussion boards. And that's for your online synchronous, your hybrid. Those discussion boards can have an opportunity to still exist in an online fashion. And then another question that I've had with lots of instructors is talking about grouping, because many faculty, they talk about how, for instance, online async is so difficult to create groups. It's hard enough in person to create these groups unless I give them a class period to meet with each other. You know, it's just hard. So some of the things that, one of the ideas I was popping around in my head lately, because I'm teaching an asynchronous class this summer, I'm trying to think about, okay, how am I doing this? Being able to create a group, but have a little mini survey before the group happens, where people talk about when are they available. So for instance, if Linda and Jake are available most Mondays, and Linda's available most Mondays 6 to 9, and Jake is available most Mondays from 5 to 8, then maybe they should be partners because they're available roughly 6 to 8 most Mondays. So they'd have that opportunity to interact with each other. And it's helping them figure out their schedule, because I've paired students based on interest, I've paired students based on topic, I've paired students randomly, but all of a sudden it came to me, I'm curious from the people who are in this room right now, if that even seems like that would be a viable thing, or it might be a useful thing to help students, because with their busy lives and understanding, I say most Mondays, because, you know, all of a sudden my kid has a talent show, you know, or something like that, who knows, right? There's things that come up, but it's just, helping them think about their scheduling. And in addition to that, in the way that groups are evaluated, having not just the evaluation of the group product, whatever comes out of it, but be able to include a couple of other components. That one is personally, how did I contribute to this group project? What did I do? How well do I feel like I contributed? And being able to also evaluate my fellow group members. And I'd like to caution you, really, if you have more than 3 or 4, it's easy for someone to start getting lost. So sometimes people don't contribute to groups because they don't know how to contribute, or because you've got those 2 loud people in the group who never let them do anything anyway. So, I mean, and those 2 loud people complain, we're doing all the work, but you don't let anybody else do anything. So, I mean, it's not always because that 3rd or 4th member or 6th or 7th member doesn't want to contribute. It's because they don't see where they fit. Sometimes it is that. So if you're going to have larger groups, you have to give them roles. you are the vocabulary illuminator, you are the the citations checker, you are the, whatever it is. You have to give them roles that they would fill, and they can decide what role they fill, but you have to provide that if you're going to have big groups. But in a pair or in a group of 3, it's really hard to get lost, and you have more opportunities for responsibility. But so those are a few things to think about for across modalities when we're thinking about our substantive interactions, to maybe give some more of those opportunities or give a little bit of support that helps students be able to find each other and to build that community amongst themselves, in addition to you dropping in, with your participation to help them realize how important it is. If you don't participate in it, it's really hard to see the importance of it for students who are like, I don't even know who that person is, but you are the expert in this room, and I love hearing what you have to say. Oh, one more caveat too for that, by the way. Research shows that, and I'm sorry, I can't cite where it is, but I can think of it. But research shows that when the instructor is active in the discussion board, of course, it increases the likelihood that students will participate in the discussion board. But you can't come down and be, the voice that knows everything and that you're always giving the answers. It's good to say, well, yeah, I saw that Jenna actually had a comment about this question that you asked. You would love to check out her point of view, or giving them an opportunity to answer each other, being able to encourage that. You're there to help with any misconceptions, of course, but it's giving them the opportunity, encouraging them, and saying, oh yeah, Amber had a great idea about this. This would be a great post for you to check out and to see what she said about it. So you're helping them find that they have expertise, because they're only going to be, well, I don't know, I shouldn't say that, because sometimes they're with you for years and you see them every single semester, but it's possible that they will only be with you for that semester. They have to learn they have to learn how else they can seek support and find resources in the world. Sometimes students, because we're not in control of their experiences, have had interactions with instructions that they are the instructors, that the instructors are the voice, and they are the answer, and they are the only one you're supposed to talk to, and they don't even know that they can seek resources from other places. They don't know how to do that. And unfortunately, it doesn't always come naturally to everyone. So we want to give them the idea of how you can. I love that Michelle mentioned earlier, helping students find their resources. You can't fix everything. And please don't hear that about this workshop session that we're talking here. We are not saying you fix everything. And no, it's you help them. Once they trust you enough to tell you about things, you know how to help them find the resource that will help them. That's what we're asking here. And what we're hoping for your interactions with your students. Please don't hear, yeah. Okay.
And Laura, I wanted to
Yeah.
piggyback off of one of the things you said. It's very clear, probably to most everyone who knows me, that I am a very strong extrovert. I do not have a problem talking in groups. I do not have a problem asking questions. Christina's job is to kick me if I get out of hand and keep me going. But one of the things that I think helped me in my role as an instructor was for book club, we read this book called Quiet by Susan Cain, and it's all about introverts and how they are making it in our world of, we are a society of extroverts, and extroversion is supported very heavily in our educational system, right? That you should be able to participate in class discussions, and you should be able to answer as soon as you're called on. And so one of the things that changed my interactions with my students in my thought processes about students who maybe weren't responding if I called on them, or was this idea that I need to provide opportunities for my students at all comfort levels in terms of participating in class discussion and participating in class and showing their knowledge. If I am scoring specifically on how many times they talk in my class, there are students who are going to fail that constantly. And there are students like myself who are going to ace that constantly. no matter how much they may know about the content. So the idea of providing a discussion board outside of classroom discussion helps to show those students, hey, maybe talking in front of 40 people is not something that's going to be great for you. But I want to know that you know the information. I want to know that you can participate. And one of the other things I do is I say, if you have a question and you don't want to ask that question in front of everybody, my email is up. Please email me your question. And I won't say who said it. I will just answer the question. And that provides students an opportunity to ask questions in class when they would not be the type of student who would ever do that. So we have to be mindful of the ways in which our students are comfortable interacting with us and provide opportunities for all of them, because we cannot grade students on strengths that are not re- required for our course materials, right? So if being louder in class is not something that is part of the class materials or the course performance objectives, your score should not be based on that. So we just have to be mindful of those soft skills that maybe we think are important, but really aren't based on anything that we are supposed to be scoring students on. Jake?
I'm so glad you brought that up. Giving the opportunity to have discussion boards has saved me. And I'll tell you, being in an education program, I'm normally usually the only guy in there. So that right there is intimidating because you don't want to like look aggressive when you ask questions or I don't know, answer questions. In this particular class, I happen to be the oldest person in the room again, including the instructor. So when speaking, I feel like I don't want to look overbearing. I don't want to look aggressive. I don't want to look like I'm trying to dominate anything. So I'll stay quiet and I'll wait for the discussion boards. And I might ask a question now and then, but there might be some other times where I really wanted to ask a question, but it's like, you already hit your quota. You can't ask anymore because you don't want to, again, look aggressive, pushy, or whatever. So the discussion board thing actually is a good idea. I know people hate doing them. They're not my favorite thing in the world, but it does give me an opportunity to actually put out there what I probably would have put out there in class, but was too afraid to. I'm really glad you touched on that.
Thanks, Jay. Thank you for sharing that.
So key takeaways, hopefully, what you guys pulled from this is, we really want to know our students. We want to understand them as people. We want to let them know that we are also people. And we just want to provide opportunities for them to feel comfortable coming to us, because that trust and communication, those interactions really do lead to substantial higher success for students academically, which we know is really the focus of what we are doing. So it's not extra. It's really should be the base, the foundation.
And we do enjoy your feedback. Feedback survey should be deployed at the end of this, but if you would like to take it on your phone, go ahead and feel free to scan the QR code. I really want to just thank Michelle so much for being here today, sharing her enthusiasm, her energy, and her expertise with us. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This is so wonderful. I really enjoyed myself getting to talk about the research that I've been engrossed in for several years now is really wonderful. So hopefully there are things that you guys got. And again, if you need any kind of additional, or you want to just sit and chat with me, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to run my mouth about the things that I've been learning, and I'm happy to help you overcome any obstacles or put things into place that you might have questions about.